Uh, Jagdish, you have been focusing on a principle called fail cheap, fail fast. How do you actually implement this? When should somebody know it's time to exit? No more experimenting.
Yeah, so I've always enjoyed the nexus of the technology and the business, and I spent half my career doing hands-on analytics, and then I decided that I want to move from technology into the business side. So then I moved into the commercial roles and started building ideas to businesses. Now, one of the challenges with ideas to business, right? It is the uncertainty. I mean, it's kind of like a startup, right? Every time you pick up an idea, it's just an idea. There are a lot of assumptions that are um, part of the process to actually make a successful business. As I said, one, you need to have a unique insight. Second, you need to have, you need to be able to defend it. Then you need to actually have a sizable market. And then you need to be able to execute it, right? And scale the business. Now, when you start, the first thing is the product market fit. I mean, you want to make sure that what the idea that you have and what problem it is solving, it is actually real. And so what we've always focused on is initially you talk to, I think, one of the common mistakes that people do is you have an idea and you internally, discuss it or have a, lot of dialogue about it. But then the most important part is you have an idea, or let's say you're selling toys to a kid, kids, right? The most important part is you need to essentially talk to the customers, so in this case, probably the parents who are the buyers and then the kids who are actually the users, right? You need to be in front of the customer. You need to essentially validate your product or your idea in the first place, right? And then you need to start looking at the aspect of the market size, and then market size as well as your business model, right? But the key aspect is what we have always done is whenever we look at an idea, every idea is different, and some of them you have to look at all the assumptions that you're looking at, and then you have to rank those, or you have to think about which assumptions are the major big assumptions, right? So for example, if you're thinking that there is, I'm going to make a drug for or vaccine for COVID, right? The major assumption is whether you have the formula or not, right? Because that people are going to buy it if it works, right? So you got to identify what are your major assumptions and major risks, and then you got to do experiments, whether it is talking to customers or whether it is essentially looking at what your technology profile looks like to validate those. And then oftentimes you will find that some things might not work. I'll give you an example. So I worked on an idea where, in petrochemical plants and refineries, right, there are essential regulations around how much methane is emitted into the atmosphere. The government regulates, EPA regulates, how much you do. So when we, there was an idea that today, I mean, many of the people actually go in and they monitor them manually, right? They go to every flange or valve and they check whether it is leaking or not, right? And so one of the ideas that came up was, this is a very manual effort, how about we just put in a sensor that measures continuously and lets I mean, you don't need the manual measurements, right? It sounded like a great, idea. And then, we went ahead, we talked to customers, we built a prototype. But what we realized as we went to conferences, we talked to customers, stuff, right? There is a huge aspect of regulation. Customers were afraid that if you put in the online measurement, right, today, if you exceed the limit, you get penalized, right? And it is required for you to report those measurements. So when you put in an online measurement, yes, it makes the life simpler. You're probably saving money on the manual measurements, but then now your measurement has to be reported to the government, and the government might say, instead of you measuring it every 3 months, now you're measuring it every day or every minute. So the government might say, hey, I mean, you're actually exceeding it every day, and the penalties might be higher, right? So you see, I mean, that is not a non-trivial assumption, right? Non-trivial issue. So you got to break into it. And one of the key metrics about, validating it is when you get the money from the customer. When they say, yes, this is a great idea, I mean, you take it take it with a pinch of salt, but when they are actually able to put some money on it, then you will see, then you know that, your assumptions are validated.
That's a great example that you took, Jagdish. It makes a lot of sense.